Did you guys get the message? Okay. So welcome everybody to our first quarter Compliance Monitoring Program Committee meeting. Just some housekeeping. We will do roll call just to note all the committee members present. If we since this is open to the public, we will be asking any non-committee members to mute themselves. And to note that this is not a forum for public comment. This is a committee meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and do roll call and call out names. And if you could just note if you're present. And if you're not present, you won't be saying anything. So just got 4 more people. Hold on 1 second.
It sounds like people are still kind of migrating from the Teams meeting over to Zoom. So I don't know if we want to wait just a few minutes before we do that.
And I might repeat what I just said as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Rebecca.
Yeah, that was like four additional folks. So
Imagine we might have some people whose power is out.
Yeah.
We do have someone who's logged in as iPhone. If you wouldn't mind changing your name on the screen, that would be super helpful. Thank you.
It looks like we got...
Yeah, I think so. Let's see.
You're good, Rod.
Okay.
And if everyone can mute themselves. Okay, one more joined. Okay, that does look like everyone.
Your earbuds on.
Okay, so we'll get started again. Welcome everyone to the first quarter of the Compliance Monitoring Program Committee for 2024. I just ask everyone to mute themselves until we do have discussions. If you are a non-committee member, we ask that you stay muted. This is, unfortunately, is not a forum for public comment, but you're welcome to listen in. And I'm going to start with roll call. And if you could just note that you're present after calling your name. So Seth Barnes.
Looks like we had Seth and then we lost him, so he may call back in.
Okay. Oh, he did. There's 3 people that are rejoining. Okay, we're doing roll call, and so I'm going to say your for the committee members, I'm going to have say your name and then just note that you're present. So Seth Barnes.
Yep.
Okay.
Present.
Stephen Koski.
Present.
Megan Tuttle.
Present.
Amanda Sullivan-Astor.
Present by video.
Rick Zen. Okay, he's present. Steve Vaughn. Okay, he's given thumbs up. Okay. Let's see. Josh Laughlin. Easy Kula.
Present.
Emily Bowes.
Alexa, go to settings.
Not see Emily. Okay. Brandon Persinger.
Present.
Rod Kramer.
Present.
Josh Seeds. Does not look present. Stephen Fitzgerald.
Here.
Okay, so that looks like our committee members. And I'm going to go ahead and get the PowerPoint started. Can everyone see that?
Yes. But sometimes, Rebecca, I can't hear you very well, and other times I can hear you really well.
Okay, I will try to speak up and more clearly. Okay, again, if you can mute yourself if you are not speaking, and I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to Adam.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks everyone for joining the committee meeting today. Rebecca, you can go to the next slide. So for today's meeting, I'm going to cover the sort of the long-term outlook for the program, probably revisit the goals as well, some reporting requirements. It's kind of what the next, at a high level, what the next 5 years look like. And then I do have some monitoring staff updates as well. I'll be handing off to Kate. She'll cover some follow-up items from the previous meeting, and then Rebecca will talk in detail about the long-term study, mainly the riparian rule and the selection process there, and we'll finish out with next steps. So if you have any questions as we go through this, please raise your hand, and hopefully we can address those questions. Next slide. So going back to the basics here and the goals for the compliance monitoring program, really the program main goal is to monitor the forest practices, rules, implementation, and analyze compliance rates, and we do that through statistically robust or statistically sound studies. We are required to work with a statistician in rural, and so we work with Mount Hood Environmental to develop study designs, studies to evaluate the compliance rates so that it can be scaled statewide. Otherwise, sort of anecdotal approach, it's hard to speak for the entire state. We also, a goal is to provide information for improving compliance rates, and we do that as an agency through education, outreach, training, clarification, and I do want to emphasize that our monitoring staff are now collecting data in a way that leads to enforcement. We are primarily focused on getting data that is representative of the state of Oregon in terms of compliance rates. Another goal is reporting findings. So we are required to report to our Board of Forestry, the legislature, and the services as well. And I'll talk more about what those reporting requirements are. Next slide. So the next 5 years, in terms of what's ahead, I wanted to start with this year, since we're in January now, the rules are in effect, and just wanted to hit on some of the major projects happening in our unit. One is the reforestation study. Staff are out collecting data. I think we're more than halfway through the study sites for that study. And so they're collecting data. The plan is after that is to analyze the data and report out the results. So we'll work with Mount Hood Environmental, a statistician on that. The riparian rule study. And you probably saw an email from Rebecca that had some documents there around the rule selection. So staff are looking at that and basically starting to assess what rules we'll monitor compliance for riparian rules, mostly in Division 643. We will be working with Mount Hood Environmental for the study design and field protocol for that as well. And then the last meeting, as part of, I think that was the last, might have been 2 meetings ago, but I had discussed a transparency plan moving forward. And part of that plan was to develop a web story or web page that, and Kate Thompson will be talking a lot more about this, but it's really to describe who we are and what we're doing. And so we're starting some initial work for that. So that's all happening this year. Looking ahead the next 5 years, the plan is to, and this is for data collection, really the focus would be 2025, start collecting data for riparian roles, and then switching to roads and steep slopes in 2026, back to riparian in 2027, and then roads and steep slopes in 2028. Now, this is the data collection. The reporting may happen, like, for example, riparian data collection, we may not get a report out until 2026. But anyway, I really wanted to emphasize here kind of the approach that we plan on taking. That way, and we're alternating back and forth so that it's when we develop the 8-year cumulative report, we'll be able to look at trends in compliance rates across the rules, different rule sets. So I see Seth has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I wasn't sure if you're planning on, I mean, and feel free to tell me to hold question till the end if that's what, I wasn't sure if you wanted questions at any point or questions at the end.
I can start fielding questions. That's fine.
Okay. All right. So the question I would have is on this calendar. Thanks for this, by the way, because this is one of the questions I had going into the meeting today was what is the sort of overall vision for how we're moving forward? And so I appreciate getting this. So one question I would have is what went into the decision to put roads and steep slopes together in a single year? Why wouldn't we instead do rotate between riparian roads, steep slopes? I mean, it seems like there's plenty in each, and I'm assuming when you're not looking at, when you say riparian, for example, in roads, there's hundreds of rules in each one of those sets. There's no way there's a budget or ability to focus on each one of those. And so I'm assuming we're talking about a subset in each one of those.
Right.
So assuming that, I'm curious why it isn't rotating between, 1 year riparian, 1 year roads, 1 year steep slopes, then back to riparian, that sort of sequence. Like what went into the decision to put roads and steep slopes together in a single year?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. And I think we can take a revisit this. So the roads and steep slopes, I think part of it was with the riparian, we did want to, I feel like that is high priority in terms of compliance monitoring. So we did want to make sure we were able to capture the trends. So like, for example, over 8 years, if we did riparian roads, steep slopes, over a period of 3 years, we would maybe get like 2 years of trend data, where in this case we'll have 4 years of riparian. And I think we had lumped roads and steep slopes. It's just a bit looking at the rules that sort of initially that was seemed manageable to do that. Just lumping those two together. And I know Rebecca was part of those discussions. Rebecca, I don't know if you had anything to add there.
Yes. Thank you, Adam. With the steep slopes, one concern was population size. So when we do our surveys, it's going to be based off completed notifications. So in 2025, we'll be taking a population of the completed notifications for 2024 and then doing a random sample of those. So with steep slopes, we were concerned that we wouldn't have enough to be statistically viable. So again, that's why we put those together with roads. In addition, the roads and steep slopes, there's a lot more engineering. And so we needed more time to develop, or we need more time to develop the field protocol and training. So I
It looks
can't
like-
see the chat or the raised
Looks
hand.
like Amanda had her hand up and then Casey.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I agree with Seth. It's good to see this as the first time we're seeing kind of your out year plan. I guess one of the questions that I have is around the fact that we don't even have the technical guidance available for implementation of all of the riparian and the road rules. And so it seems a little bit out of step in my mind to be starting to monitor this year's progress when we don't even have clear direction from ODF on how we're supposed to implement. My thought would be that one, we would focus where we do have technical guidance. And, really, I understand what you're saying, Rebecca, on the population size and the statistical significance on the steep slopes. I do think that there's benefit of trying to go slow before we go fast and get it right before we get something significantly wrong. I think in my mind, that lends itself to looking at steep slopes first, given it is focused on large industrial landowners, primarily if we're looking at slope retention areas. There's a certification and training mechanism there that is in place. There's online training. So I think people are a lot more up to snuff on how to actually implement that piece. And so we get better data and more accurate data on compliance. And we have a really good mechanism if we do see a compliance issue to be able to address that through the specific training that ODF already has. To me, that seems like it makes more sense than the kind of quagmire of riparian. And not to say that any one thing is more important than anything else. I mean, AOL wasn't a negotiator in the MOU. But I have to imagine that nothing would have gotten in the PFA report if it wasn't important. So I wouldn't say one thing is more important than any other thing that's kind of taken in collection. But those are just some of my initial thoughts, and happy to have you respond or let Casey say what he wants.
Sure. Yeah. And before we jump to Casey, just real quick. So I think that's a fair point. Yeah, emphasizing one over the other maybe isn't the best approach. So are you suggesting possibly of pushing things back to 2026 and starting with roads and steep slopes? Just want to make sure I'm tracking sort of the suggestion here.
I mean, I think it depends what you start with. If you really want to start with riparian, I think it's more reasonable to start in 2026 with riparian rules. But if you wanted to do something in 2025, steep slopes to me makes the most sense. I'm just one opinion in the room, and I recognize that. But that, I don't think we need to forego 2025. I think we just need to be really thoughtful about how we do that, given the massive sweeping changes that we're looking at. And, there's so many people that are still trying to figure out what the rules even are. We continue to hear different perspectives and opinions and thoughts from different folks in in the field, within ODF and outside of ODF. And so there's just a lot of confusion still. So again, just being really, really thoughtful, I think is really important for especially identifying that first thing that we study.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, I appreciate that, the feedback there. I think, just as a, managing this program, there's funding involved and positions and resources. And so, delaying things wouldn't be an option. I know you're not necessarily saying that, but we can take a look at it and, kind of think about what makes sense in terms of starting. I will say we have done a lot of effort up to this point with this in mind of starting with riparian. And so it would definitely push things back to switch now and pivot and focus on roads. But it's something we can discuss internally. Casey?
Yeah, it's funny how you raise your hand on one thing and then 4 other things show up too. But I appreciate those thoughts. I think that I think we're gonna go through. Maybe you just give me a thumbs up. We're gonna go through the riparian rule questions. That there was the document that was sent out to us. Is that accurate, Adam?
Yes.
Or
Well, I don't know. Rebecca's gonna cover that in more detail. I don't know if we're gonna walk through the Excel sheet, Rebecca.
No, we won't be going line by line. I'm hoping everyone provides their input and sends it to the compliance monitoring email with their input. So we want to get some, if people have some specific examples that they want to address and they have some field experience of why something might not work, we want to have people raise those, but that would take probably months to go line by line because it took me months. So
yeah, I was just thinking there is an opportunity today for people to raise, and it sounds like yes. I think that I hear the concerns about roads and steep slopes versus riparian. The question that I wanted to throw out there was just how far along is technical guidance for the different components that we don't have yet. It sounds like, Adam, based upon the kind of work plan that's laid out here, there will be a sufficient technical guidance to folks before you're out there collecting data. Is that correct? Or I don't know if you're able to answer that one.
I haven't been tracking technical guidance that closely. I know they're definitely making progress on that front. I don't know exactly when that's going to come out. But yeah, it's a good question. I can look into that. Assuming by 25 we'll have something substantial by then. But yeah. Seth.
That's great. And then I just had one.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. I should have said I've got 3 things and I'm on 2 and now I'm on 3. And this is just it's probably one for another conversation, but just flagging that Amanda's observation about differing reporting or perspective or within ODF. And I'd love to just go down that rabbit hole some other time because it sounds like an interesting thing. It sounds like there's maybe differing perspectives or maybe on compliance. I'm not sure what, but it sounds like something that we should probably discuss as part of compliance monitoring program committee. So thanks.
Sure. Thanks, Casey. Seth.
Okay, so just sort of to dovetail on with what Amanda was saying, I think it's not and maybe to help clarify for Casey or anybody else who might be confused, in terms of implementation, it's not a matter of, when you start monitoring, do you have guidance by that point? Because when you start monitoring, you're obviously monitoring stuff that's actually been accomplished prior, right? So it's really about what guidance is available today, right now. Right? Because right now is the stuff we would be monitoring next year, right? It's stuff that's happening today. And so if there's no guidance on something today, say take, for example, CMZs, right? There is no guidance on a channel migration zone in Oregon. So people are doing the best they can to implement the rule, because the rule says you have to start your bank your buffer from the edge of the channel migration zone. But there's no guidance on how to find that in the state of Oregon. And so if we were to go to monitor that next year, and how would we even tell whether they've complied with the rule or not? Even if there was a CMZ guidance next year, well, that didn't help anybody implementing the rule today. So that's the problem, and it goes beyond just CMZs. There's a bunch of other, and it's not to say people aren't doing the best they can and implementing the rule and doing a decent job. I believe they are. Everybody I know I talked to is trying to take a very thoughtful approach. There's been a lot of conversation in the field happening between stewardship foresters and field foresters for companies dealing with these things and trying to do the best they can, and pulling in, should we look at Washington guidance for CMZs or whatever, doing the best they can and using the best tools that they have. But that becomes a nightmare to try to do compliance monitoring on, because there's no one way at this point that a lot of those things are happening. And so a lot of that stuff is sorting itself out. Some of what they're learning today is going to go into the guidance that's developed over the next several months. But that highlights the problem with looking at riparian, because there are so many nuances to riparian. You've got everything from the type NP and the type NS with the so maybe we do have guidance around ELZs. So there's some piece of it where we have some guidance, but there's not a lot of guidance over a lot of the rest of it. And so if we were, sort of stuck on it's got to be riparian, well, then we really should take a very careful look at what do we have guidance for, what is fairly clear on how people are to implement it, and can we measure that, or pivot, as Amanda was suggesting, to something else, such as the slopes or some other thing in roads that maybe has a clarity around it right now. Anyway, I won't take any more time. Steve's got his hand up, but I just wanted to clarify that. That's why the guidance is important.
Yeah, and you're correct that if we were to collect data, we follow this plan, this would be for operations that are occurring through during this year, possibly operations that are happening right now. So Stephen.
Adam?
Yep.
Before Steve, I just wanted to, and I'm going to be addressing this in my section, but it might put folks at ease. We are, with the riparian rules, are going to start basic. We're going to be baseline. It will be our first year with this long-term study. So we aren't going to be picking a whole bunch of rules. Not all the rules are going to be looked at. We couldn't do that. So again, it will be baseline, basics, stream buffers. We won't be getting into those complex ones. We are going to be able to add rules to the compliance monitoring down the road, because again, it isn't feasible to do all of them. So hopefully that puts some folks at ease that the initial rules will not be the complex, the ones that we are still working through.
That's helpful. Thanks, Rebecca.
Okay. So my comment probably just echoes what Amanda's was, in that in this transition year, I worry a bit about, without the hard guidance of mistakes or things that are implemented quite like the rules are, and that might be written up in a report, and so it's a transition year, and so I worry a little bit about the results may not be indicative of when we have clear guidance and we move forward. So I mean, if you stick with the riparian part, it could be if an area wasn't laid out right. I think the question is, it's not that it wasn't laid out right. What were the issues and why? Was it the lack of guidance or what? So that's my 2 cents worth.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. and we'll be getting more into the riparian rule selection once Rebecca's presenting. Appreciate all the feedback on that. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so reporting, again, I think we've covered this before. Just as a reminder, we do have a biannual report to the Board of Forestry every 2 years, and then a cumulative report every 8 years. Once the incidental take permit is issued, we will be providing information to the services, support the HCP, and then also we're required to draft a complete an annual report to the public on HCP performance. Next slide. So just some monitoring staff updates for your awareness. So Hazel Daniels was in an NRS2 position. She got a dream job in New Zealand and doing forest pathology work. And so I just filled that position. Sarah Sifkin from Utah starts I believe it's January 29th. She's got a background in fish biology and some Parks and Rec experience. And then we also just hired Marta Frias-Bedolla. She's an administrative specialist too. And another NRS2 position, David Showalter was in. Some of you may know David from AMC. He took a developmental position in another unit for a year, and so I'll be backfilling that position soon. So probably at some point we'll be meeting Marta and Sarah sometime down the road. So just wanted to make you aware of that. And I believe that's all the slides that I had. Yeah, so I'll hand it over to Kate. I guess before I hand it over to Kate, are there any other questions?
Just really quick, Adam, behind David, is that going to be another developmental you'll try to pull from somewhere else in the org, or is that going to be like an LD?
Yeah, it'll be a developmental or a job rotation. I think the distinction there is, well, I won't go into the state government job details, but yeah, it'll be a 1-year developmental.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yep. Any other feedback or questions? All right, Kate, I'll hand it over to you now.
Okay, thanks everyone. I'm here to talk about the web story. We're kind of in the early stages of putting that together and expanding on our website. Kind of talk about what that is and what that would mean. So right now we've got kind of a little blurb, and if you go to any units that has a website information, there's like a little paragraph. The idea of putting together a larger web story is to approach this in a little more of a long form way so that we can expand on what's going on, bring people in and educate the public about the compliance monitoring program using both text and graphics, so we can talk a little longer about ourselves and we can give people a look at where our real office is outside the building. So through words and images, we're wanting to show who we are and what we do, why we do what we do, how we do it, what we learn, and how we use the information that we gather. That's all the reporting and the informing and things that we do with that work. So one example that we've been looking at quite heavily, and Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind clicking through to that link, I'm not sure if it's going to switch screens, but it's the Washington Department of Natural Resources. Their compliance monitoring program has a story map that shows basically these same things. Who are these folks? What do they do? I'm not seeing it come up on your screen, Rebecca, but maybe we can drop that in chat. Oh, we need to swap. Let me just give Rebecca a second here. Seth, you have your hand up while we're waiting for the screen to swap.
Yeah, I think that's great. The one piece of feedback I would have on this, sort of telling the story of compliance monitoring program, who we are, why we do it, what we do, that's fantastic. applaud you for doing it. The one piece that I find repeatedly as I bring this up is there's misunderstanding about when you talk about compliance monitoring, people assume that is the sum total of compliance at the Department of Forestry. When you talk about the stewardship foresters, people think that's the sum total of the compliance program in the department. And so it's really difficult to make sure people understand. I think really important to make sure people understand there's two compliance arms to the Department of Forestry. One is the army of stewardship foresters that are out there doing compliance every single day. And the other is this compliance monitoring program, which is a rolled up sort of statistical look at the state. And that is so as you're telling the story, I think it's really important that you lay that foundation that this is not the sum total of the compliance program in the state of Oregon. This is one arm, and there's also this other arm. So I think you do a disservice if you just talk about the one without making sure people understand there is this other. And I wouldn't say you have to go in depth, but that sort of foundation so people understand that there's those levels of compliance and that this is what this program does.
Yeah, thanks, Seth. Yeah, that's been a point of confusion is kind of who does what and how do we all fit together in the big picture. And I agree with you that that's a really good place to make that a little clearer for folks. So what you're looking at here is what the Washington DNR's monitoring program has done. And so, Rebecca, you can just scroll through that. It's pretty casual. We'll drop the link in chat here. Once I'm done, I'll pop that in there. But it's again, here's the background with lots of pretty pictures. What are going down to simple things? What are resources? What are we talking about here? What are we looking at? And they talk about how they do their studies. And basically here's the work we do, here's how we go about it, here's where we do our work, and so on and so on. So it's a chance to talk at a little more length, but it's also a chance to make it a little more graphical so that it's not just a bunch of people sitting in an office or standing in front of a building or something like that might be more typical of a website. Move on to the next slide, please. So what we're doing that's right now is we're kind of laying the groundwork to make this happen. So we're working with public affairs to make sure that we're not, getting too far out over our skis and that we're within agency guidelines for what can go up on the website, that we're not doing anything that's going to break anything, or, all the little practical things that we have to keep in mind as we put this together so that we're making good decisions. And then once we've got that sorted out, we're going to determine what the best way is to develop that content and make something that's both informative and visually appealing. And to that end, if anybody has any lovely pictures you think might be worth sharing, we'd be happy to see them and take them into consideration for inclusion. But the longish term goal is to have something put together by June 30th of 2025, which is the end of the biennium. And when we receive that deliverable before it's posted on the website, we'll run it by everyone here for feedback and any input as far as both content and visuals. Any other questions or any thoughts about what that might look like or include, or just general questions?
Hey, this is Rebecca. I just want to follow up with what Seth had mentioned. And on the current compliance monitoring program website, we will be looking into adding some language at the start to help clarify the compliance monitoring program and then stewardship enforcement. So we will be addressing that sooner than getting the web map or web story. Just because it's a good point and we want to get that messaging out there soon.
Yeah, thanks for that, Rebecca. Yeah, the website as it exists is not trapped in amber or set in stone, and it's always kind of a work in progress. And so that is something that we're looking into right now, is just reviewing that language and clarifying where we can clarify. Amanda is.
Yeah, one thing I think is also important as it relates to the folks that I represent, the operator community, is recognizing that the compliance monitoring targeted enforcement, but that's not necessarily, you know, we took data from this specific NOAP, therefore, and if we found an issue, that specific operator is going to get a ticket. That's not what targeted enforcement means. But that means that moving forward, if we do find a systemic issue with this specific rule, that there will be more of an emphasis put on, for instance, stewardship foresters when they're analyzing that specific piece of an activity. So I think just clarifying that for the people that are being monitored, I think is also really important.
Yeah,
I think that's really valuable input, Amanda, and thank you for that.
Yeah, and I that's how I interpreted target enforcement as well. I know that looks really scary, being in goals, purpose and goals and compliance monitoring, and that and I think that the thing to focus on there is, you know, that in terms of our program, that the information will improve compliance through these other mechanisms, but those mechanisms like education, outreach, and then targeted enforcement being one of those happens outside of our program. But yeah, I agree. It's going to take to identify that systemic, if there is any systemic issues, will take years. It's not like, oh, there's low compliance here. We're just going to start, you know, writing tickets everywhere. So it's gonna be a long process and over time. So appreciate your feedback comment there.
And this is Casey. I just want to say thanks, Adam. Thanks, Kate, for putting this together and getting it out to the world. Even if it's deliverable by June 30, 2025, I still appreciate it. We have good examples around, like the Washington one, and I think this will be a lot better.
Thanks, Casey.
Okay, next slide, Rebecca. That's all I have. It's a very short show today.
Okay, looks like I'm up here. So sorry, my internet is a little bit slow. Okay. So I wanted to follow up on the charter. This was an item that we talked about back in September. We did actually receive some input this morning, and so we're going to additional input. Thank you for those who have sent input since I sent it out in October. We are going to need to take some time to review that input that came in. So if anybody else has any additional feedback, please send that to the monitoring email. And then the monitoring unit staff will review that, and we will get those incorporated and discuss those. And also just to note that when we do have a finalized charter, we actually don't, because we are this is a advisory committee, we don't actually have a voting process. So it will be when it's agreed upon, we'll accept it and just put it on the website. So, and also in addition to that, it is going to be a working charter. So throughout the year, if we see like little minor edits or things that we want to discuss, we will be able to address it. And we will annually be revisiting the charter. So it's not going to be like set in stone. I just want you to know that we will be, it's a working document. So we'll revisit that again at our next meeting, since we didn't receive additional feedback. And then if you didn't have time over the holidays, please send your feedback. Let's try to do it by the end of January so that we can get that kind of checked. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the long-term study updates. Okay, and kind of to set the stage, I just, many of you know this, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page with regards to the Compliance Monitoring Program Committee role. So as noted in the charter, the committee is established as an advisory body to the ODF Compliance Monitoring Program. The committee is charged with providing perspective, input, and assisting the CMP or the Compliance Monitoring Program and to inform the development of our program. So the expertise that you have from being in the field, you may have insight that we miss. And so really we're relying on you to provide that additional input from your perspective. We shared with you the riparian rules and the associated notes with the community for two main reasons. One, to show process transparency, and second, to gain further insight from those on the committee who have FPA implementation experience. But ultimately, it will be the ODF monitoring unit and subject matter experts that will be making the rule selection. And then I wanted to talk about constraints, and this has been mentioned by some of the committee members. We will not be able to measure compliance for all the rules highlighted in blue. Like if you recall, the ones under consideration were blue, and the ones that we deemed were not possible, given that would be better suited for a stewardship forester to address at that time, either during pre, active, or post inspections. So when considering the rules to include, we need to consider, cost effectiveness to measure the compliance, what necessary can be field verified a year, after a year, what can we assess and what can we assess across the entire state? Other constraint is population size. Like I mentioned earlier, the population will be the number of completed notifications received for a given activity related to that rule chosen. And we will pull a random sample from that population. So again, that could be a constraint if we don't have a whole lot, and we want to be statistical sound. So those are some other constraints. The other one I want to mention is that this will be the first year where participation is not voluntary. So we have to take that into consideration. The rule now says that they shall accommodate access. And so that will be a new process that ODF staff will be implementing. Okay, rule selection process. And this came out in the email. Can you guys still hear me? I'm getting a note that my internet is unstable. Can everybody still hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great, Rebecca.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so to begin, we chose the riparian rules first for compliance monitoring for multiple reasons, and I mentioned this earlier. We are working on an aquatic HCP. The RMA or riparian management areas or the buffers in general are reasonable to measure. In addition, the road, RCAs, the FRIA reporting, at the steep slopes, they have some engineering components and are going to take time to get actually information out of those. So the rule selection, study design, and protocol development process will take longer for us to develop for those rules and some of the other reasons I mentioned about population size. So when it comes to the riparian rules and considering the factors we need to look at, and again, this was in the email, is the rule measurable? Is it possible to determine compliance a year after the activity is completed? Is the rule more suitable for a stewardship forester to assess at the time of activity and operation? Again, they are our, front lead, and that they will, if they see an issue, they can issue a corrective order. So again, there are some areas that they're best suited to address those particular issues. Was the rule assessed in the past by ODF, and do we have record of there being an issue with the particular rule? And then also, is this rule being assessed by other states? Like I've thoroughly looked through all the rules that Washington State uses in their program, and again, their program is a lot different, but I was able to look at rules that they are including in their compliance monitoring that are similar to our rules, and I highlighted that in that document. So, and again, I want to highlight this. This is a new program. We want to start out with a reasonable set of measurable rules, a set that will be like the baseline, like the very basics. that we can measure every other year. And then we will be able to add additional rules down the road as we develop the program and refine the process. So hopefully that addresses the concerns about those rules where there are some, gray areas we're still trying to figure out. We're going to be very simple and basic. If you think about it, the reforestation rules right now, we're really looking at like 3 rules. So again, I'm not saying that we're just going to have 3 rules for riparian, but we are going to keep it simple, measurable, binary yes, no, when it comes to the rule selection. So I do want to open it up for discussion right now. And I wasn't planning on going rule by rule. The idea was that if you guys had a chance to review that document, if you agree or disagree, or if you just want to put the ones you disagree with, or you have additional insight of a way to measure it, that would be very valuable for us to see. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up for discussion about riparian rules. And I can't see raised hands, so if Kate or Adam, if you see raised hands, if you could call on them.
Sure, I'm not seeing any yet.
Amanda?
Yeah, I have just kind of a general question. So some of the way that some of the questions are worded that are in blue, it depends, I guess is the best the best way to say. So like as a example, just on the first page, did the operator retain all trees leaning over the channel? If a tree is like leaning over a channel or within the tree is, if the stump is within the unit, but the tree is leaning, into the RMA, and it can be harvested by jacking it towards the unit and away from the RMA, you can remove that tree as long as the stump is within the unit. So leaning, I guess, one, how would you know if it's leaning if you have a stump there and you don't have the actual tree? If the tree is still there, obviously you can say yes, but I guess for something like that, it just doesn't seem like a very, and there's other examples of things like that, where there is allowances within rule to do certain things. So, I mean, I can provide that in kind of your formal comment process, Rebecca, but that's one of many examples.
I actually did receive additional comments from Thomas, and that I believe I can't recall exactly, but if that would be leaning over the channel, so that would be definitely in the RMA. If it's on the on the unit side, you're correct. So his additional comment that I received from him regarding that one is that rule is actually assessed when you're looking at the RMA rule. So that wouldn't be like a standalone rule. That would be one that you would assess. You would see, like, are you seeing any harvesting in the RMA? That would be evident in that rule, and that this rule would kind of combined with that rule. So there are many nuances, and that, working again with Thomas, like he had done a preliminary, but he just did another run through and he found some additional ones where it depends, what lens you're looking at. So those are ones that, that may be blue now, but may turn to red because we need guidance or there's additional. So again, when I put those in blue, they were still under consideration, but it doesn't mean they are being considered at this, we still haven't gotten there. But I do appreciate any nuances because those are going to be issues that the compliance crews will be running into, and we want to make sure that we're not out there struggling to determine, is it in compliance or is it not? We want it to be pretty clear.
Yep.
Viewing these rules, I realize what a difficult job stewardship foresters have. It's like there is a lot to look at, and I really appreciate their on the ground work of, helping landowners in their planning, implementation, and, even post operation. Just wanted to put that out there. Definitely send your comments to the compliance monitoring email. If people feel more comfortable, know that we are, so you don't waste a lot of time, putting down some concerns. We are very aware of the nuances, and we'll be taking that into consideration. And again, I have to emphasize, we really want a baseline set of rules to start out with, and we won't be like making it super complicated by any means for the first year of new rules. Is everyone good if I move to the next slide then? Or does give anybody more chance to talk?
Yeah, Megan, I'm good. Sorry, since you can't see us, I figured I'd
Okay.
shout it out.
Okay, thank you.
I guess, Rebecca, so there are a lot of blues still in this document. Are you going to provide us a new document with an update so we aren't wasting time commenting on things that maybe are no longer blue?
Yeah, I can do that. Yes. The ultimate goal would be to, if you have like insight on a particular assessing a rule, I wanted to get in committee member comments and put those in the document anonymous as committee member comments. And then the idea was to have this as an appendix to the technical document that is created, just to show how we went through this process. Yes, a lot of there are some blues right now that will be turning to red. So it's up to you guys if you want me to send you an updated one now or wait till I get feedback and then send an updated one. Any preferences? I'd rather do it once. So I believe I gave you a deadline for providing feedback. Once I get that feedback and incorporate it, I can send you an updated document. Does that sound like a plan?
I have pretty limited capacity, and so there's no way I can get through all of this. We've got our annual convention this weekend. I'm managing our Oregon professional logging program. We've got a leadership program coming up. There's no way that I can get through every single one of these blue things by then. And all of this it's not that this is the only time that I'm busy. I've been busy. So
yes,
I would rather spend time on things that I know are being considered, and recognizing the conversation we had earlier on, is there going to be any other finessing of this? Like, are we really going to be like, do you really want comments on every single piece of this? Or are we really just going to be focusing on baseline assessment? Those are different questions. Those are different ways of thinking about a study and a study design than how a lot of these questions are formatted about the rules. And so it's important work, and I want to make sure that you guys are getting the operator perspective. But I have to recognize my own time commitments as well.
I totally respect that. And so actually what you could do, I could send you the latest one with Thomas's input that he received, but otherwise I don't think you should worry too much about it. And it will come up, and I'll bring this up in the next few slides, the next steps. So if you don't have time right now, you can, as things arise, you can let me know. But I think you'll be fine. Like you'll be able to see the results by February. So
Okay, my concern is that in the email it said you wanted to make decisions on which specific rules by mid-February. And so it seems like this is our only chance to get you feedback.
there'll be additional, throughout this whole program and being part of the committee, you'll be able to provide input. And like I said, you know, what we're starting out with, this document is going to carry us out in the out years, right? So like, when we want to add additional rule to the baseline rules, we can look at this document. So we want input because we will be looking at this document long term. So you know, you'll be able to provide input on the ones that we do get selected. Again, there'll be baseline. And then in the out years, when we look at adding an additional few or one or two, you can provide input at that time as well. So I don't want you to think it's set in stone. Does that make sense? Or do you feel comfortable with that?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, the way that I'm interpreting this, and let me know if I'm not understanding correctly, is that you want to get our comprehensive analysis of all of these so that the compliance monitoring program, although won't be selecting all of these for this first round or this first iteration, will go back and reference back to this comprehensive document moving forward. So you're wanting to front load that analysis work by the stakeholder group is what it sounds like.
Yes, correct. But again, there will be time in the future to respond to it. And I also have to note, we'll be doing the same thing for roads and steep slopes as a transparency, so you can see what we're internally discussing. And then if there's input that we can receive from, you know, you guys who have rule expertise, you know, can add additional insight. So it is going to be a process. And but I would say you were correct.
Okay, so it would be helpful, or would it be helpful is probably better to frame it as a question, to, you know, provide that background or provide that comment in here, thinking about, okay, if we had all the technical guidance, if we had, you know, all the right things in place, right? Kind of looking at this comprehensively from that perspective, and then perhaps adding additional comments and prioritization from our own respective perspectives on which rules we might suggest starting with or holding off on, things like that. Would that be helpful at this phase?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. So again, if you could provide that input by February 5th. Again, that's just the first deadline for, again, this is a long process. It's a long-term study. So I wanted to share with you guys the next steps.
Hey, can you hold on, Rebecca? You have a question in chat.
Could you read it to me? Sorry.
Yes. It's from Rick Zen, asking, are you doing any tracking of questions and issues landowners ask about?
I haven't, those are kind of going through the field support group and as well as through the education and training group. And I know they're tracking those, but the monitoring unit at this point, we have not been.
Yeah, we work closely with the field support unit. And so I know that they've looked at this rule selection process, and Rebecca works closely with Thomas Whittington, water specialist, water quality specialist, and the field support. So we do hear when things come up, but yeah, we're not formally tracking anything.
And this is Casey. Sorry, Kate's reference to the question, I was going to highlight that too, but I wanted to go back to the comments from staff in the riparian rules about this one's, you know, not it doesn't meet the standards for us to be able to include it in the compliance monitoring program, and I really appreciated that. I do think that I assume that there's a way for stewardship foresters to provide the input about different ways of maybe getting to the same, including some of these rules into compliance monitoring program based upon the things that they're hearing and seeing in the field. So I guess it's a little bit like what are landowners hearing? What's the process of getting stewardship forester comments and observations into rule monitoring? Sorry, long question.
if you guys are okay, I'm gonna try to address this. So one of the things that when we were looking at these rules is, the guidance is not rule. So we didn't want to base rule compliance on guidance. It had to be kind of binary yes or no. So if we went that route, we would, have to look at the guidance again, which is not rule, and develop some sort of metrics to measure that rule. And I know this is something that Washington State has done, which there introduces subjectivity. So that is a discussion that we will need to have in the future if we go that route. And so that kind of addresses a little bit of what you're saying, Casey, is, what one stewardship forester says, like is the metric may not be what another stewardship forester says. And we have to take that into consideration when we're trying to do a statewide monitoring effort.
Totally. That's super helpful, Rebecca. Thanks. I think that, over time it'll be like stewardship foresters are reporting either different things or observations about rules that you haven't figured out how to put them into a compliance monitoring. And at that point, is probably when you'll have to, it'll rise to the level of, okay, how do we measure this objectively? So thank you. I appreciate that.
Any questions in chat or any other hands raised? Go ahead and will let me. Okay, next steps. So again, the ODF staff, the monitoring unit, and not just the monitoring unit, but like Adam mentioned, the subject matter experts, the field support, will be going through that feedback. So I noted that. Again, I have to emphasize, we'll be choosing a set of baseline rules to measure every other year to help measure the trends. So the next steps is we hope to provide these rules to Mount Hood Environmental by the end of February. And using the rules selected, we are requesting Mount Hood Environmental to come up with 2 to 3 alternative study designs and to provide some recommendation on sampling protocol based off, what do they know is out there that people are utilizing in terms of sampling protocol. We want to have MHE or Mount Hood Environmental present these alternatives at the April 11th, 2024 Compliance Monitoring Program Committee to give this committee time to ask questions, provide input. So then the next step would be ODF monitoring staff will choose, based on the feedback, the preferred alternative and begin working with MHE on the details and development of the field protocol. We will have MHE provide presentation to the committee on the resulting technical document, which will lay out the study design, the field protocol analysis approach for the 2025 riparian rule study, assessing compliance of the 2024 completed notifications. And so that we would like to have presented to the committee at the third quarter of this year. So that kind of lays out the framework, and I just to kind of jump ahead a little bit, we will repeat the same process for the roads and steep slopes, and that will begin towards the end of the year, beginning of 2025. So questions? And before I'm going to stop the PowerPoint, but really quick, please provide input on the rules for monitoring by February 5th, and then note that the compliance monitoring meeting, the next one will be April 11th, and that's when we will have MHE present the alternatives. Now I can see everyone. Hi. So
Rebecca, do you have tentative dates scheduled throughout the end of the year for these meetings yet?
yes,
Even if they change, it would be super helpful to get those dates and block them out.
I believe I sent out an invite for all those dates. Did you guys get those?
I did not receive any invites
Okay,
for the year.
I will resend those. I believe we have April 11th is a meeting, and then we have one. Believe it's, well, I won't even guess for those quarters, but I will send those out after this meeting. Amanda?
Yeah, folks can totally shoot this down if they want. But I'm just wondering if it makes sense for us to meet one more time this year, or especially as this is getting going and we're thinking about this front loading of wanting to get, you know, more input on the different rules and the different methodologies that we may be thinking of. I guess I'd just like to see what people think about meeting either, you know, maybe it's sometime between now and April. It seems like seems like a long time away from now with all of the things that all the points that have been brought up today. But Adam, I see you're off mute. Maybe you've got a
Yeah, we can. I think I'm open to that idea. If others would like to have another meeting to get into more of the details of the rule selection. I see Steve's got his thumb up. Steven, any others? Megan, yeah, we could set something up. So let's see, April 11th. I guess midpoint would be what? Early March, late February.
Would you like to be before we submit the rules that we select to MHE for creating those alternatives? Because we need to give them time to create alternatives. So it'd be like mid-February.
I think that would be more helpful for me as far as, you know, kind of getting feedback from this diverse group in earnest and having it really mean something. You know, like I said, I've got limited capacity, but I want to make sure that we are helping you guys in a way that's useful and on a timeline that's most useful for the department. So if that is helpful to get additional feedback, give us time to really massage our thoughts around the extensive information that you guys have provided. I mean, I'll do everything I can to make that meeting, make sure I get you what you guys need, and then we can have a little bit more of a robust conversation at that meeting about kind of what is submitted to Mount Hood Environmental, and with giving them enough time to create those alternatives. But that's just my thoughts. And I could be totally in left field, so.
Yeah, so Rebecca, do you want to set that up? And it sounds like mid-February.
Yes, I will. I hate to do doodle polls on people. Should I just select a date that Adam and Kate and I are available and then send it out there? Or do you guys want to go the doodle poll route?
Rebecca, I would rather actually just figure it out and like meet your schedule than have to do a doodle poll. Sorry.
Okay.
I was like, I'll just cram myself into your agenda.
Okay. No, that will help. So we'll get a date on the calendar and I will get that out to you today. And then I will also get you the other dates that we have scheduled for this year for the quarterly meetings.
And Rebecca, in case you can't see it in the chat, there's a comment from Megan Tuttle. So
Let's see.
Then not the 14th.
Not the 14th. Okay.
Or the 22nd, because that's supposed to be the Board of Forestry meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll look for major meetings so they don't overlap.
Okay.
I can help with that, Rebecca.
You guys don't want to spend Valentine's Day talking about rules?
I am, it's just in another state.
No, I understand. It does kind of make your head spin. I've been immersed in it. Okay.
Hey, Rebecca,
Yes.
I will chime in. I do like having some say. I do like doodle polls. I know some folks said that they don't. If there's maybe a few options you could give us, like 3 options, that might be more helpful to make sure that folks can attend versus just, you know, here's the date and make it or don't make it, because it just seems like an important meeting to be able to attend. So if you guys could give us maybe 3 options just in an email that we could respond to, that might be a better way to get fuller participation.
Okay. everybody okay with that? 3 options in an email today with a deadline of giving me your response. Okay. Sounds good. And I do apologize that I was missing the comments or the chat because I couldn't see it. Is there any go backs or any additional comments folks would like to add? I really do appreciate you guys taking your time. I know you're very busy. Getting your input and expertise is very valuable for the agency.
Rebecca, thanks for sharing the document and allowing us to see the logic and the fact pattern and how ODF was looking at the rules. That was really useful for us to get a deep dive into how ODF is going about setting up the compliance monitoring program. And I know we've talked a little bit about how it's a little overwhelming for a document, but I'm looking forward to seeing what you do in the future with roads and steep slopes because you've set the bar very high.
And thank you very much, Megan, for that. The other thing is that idea about guidance not being rule. So that is a really, right now, as a driving force, we're trying to stay away from guidance. In the past, guidance was used, and it was the monitoring unit created metrics for that guidance. A pass fail, or so that is going to be a discussion if we even go down that route in the future.
And what I heard from the conversation, and someone can correct me if I'm getting this wrong, I don't think anyone was trying to imply that you needed guidance included in compliance monitoring. It was more of for landowners to be effective and for everyone to implement the rules the same way, guidance is needed before compliance monitoring occurs from an operation and landowner perspective.
Yes.
So it's good to, I think, divide that and make that very clear.
Thank you. Yes. And I did get the 2, but it made me think about the guidance in terms of when it comes to rule selection, but you're correct on that one.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. Thanks, Megan. Because I was like, wait a minute, they're different. But I think I felt like, Rebecca, you also were picking up that you didn't want to start monitoring until there was guidance, but you expect to have the guidance, and we're not monitoring for the guidance. Yeah, thank you. And hopefully we can all help the folks who are writing guidance with getting that out too.
Thank you. And Seth noted, or someone here on the committee noted, there's so many nuances, and it's taking those into consideration, strong consideration when it comes to compliance monitoring.
Well, yeah, thank you everyone for your feedback and attending today, your engagement. So it's really helpful for us. And so if there's any ways that we can improve sharing information or communicating, please let us know. That way your feedback is more efficient and effective. So Casey, it looks like you got your hand up.
Yeah, I think that just prompted a question about budgets, right? I assume that this is going to take some money to do each of these, and you're going to be developing the budget for that work, and you have a budget for compliance monitoring. Is there anything that the folks who are here need to know about budget development going into the 2025-27 biennium?
Yeah, not at this point. So right now, this recent current biennium, we had, I believe it was 250,000 that was moved from previous biennium to this biennium. At this point, I'm assuming that that's going to stay same or similar, but yeah, it's just no updates there. But you did notice probably in Kate's slide that the deliverable was June 30th, 2025, and that definitely was because of budgeting. So yeah. All right. Well, thank you everyone. And I guess we can wrap up there.
Hey,
And
I just had one other maybe quick question
Question.
for Rebecca and you, Adam. If there's any way that you guys can provide some additional information to us, Rebecca, you had mentioned earlier some of the sort of, looking at more of a, I would not high level, but more of that sort of baseline, simplistic view of the rules. If you guys can maybe flesh that out for us a little bit more of what that means, I think that would be really helpful for me as I look at the rule set and think about sort of this first round. Because, we are looking at compliance, and compliance is usually a yes, you complied, or no, you didn't. I don't really know how baseline information weighs into compliance monitoring. So that would be really helpful for me as I move forward. And then with a lot of the comments brought up here on kind of what we look at first and sort of some of the potential larger shifts, as you guys have internal discussions, if anything does change, just getting that to us via email, I think is fine prior to the next meeting. Just again, so we're all really on the same page and there is that transparency of thought. Not that we need to be in all the conversations, but just if anything does change substantively, that we are made aware of that. I think that would also be really helpful.
Okay. And I could quickly respond. Are you okay, Adam? Did you?
Oh, well, just a thought here. It's in terms of simplifying which roles we are initially proposing to monitor. Would it be helpful if we actually took Division 643 and like highlighted which rules or rule sections?
We actually did that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, in the document, there's that, right?
Uh-huh.
But I mean, just actually physically taking that rule set PDF or did we do that? I don't.
We didn't actually do it for
We
the.
dumped it into a Word document, and then there's a lot of text there. So I'm just trying to think of other ways of simplifying it for the committee if it's.
I'm going to make a statement here, and this may or may not help with the baseline, but if you think about, with the lens of the HCP, aquatic species, and you look at the rules that are, when I say baseline, a 110-foot buffer, right? That's a pretty baseline, easy. You can either do it if we have updated LiDAR, or you can go out in the field and you can measure it. That's very simple baseline versus maybe one where you're trying to figure out, that the NP streams or, the ELZ zone. There are some nuances to that are time consuming, so when I say baseline, it's if you look at those rules that are just kind of black and white and are relevant to the HCP, those are kind of what I'm kind of trying to get at. But we will put that in a narrative so that helps. But those rules where there's any kind of nuance or like, oh, I don't know, if kind of those are ones we're going to probably stay clear of for the first year.
Okay, so when you're saying baseline, you mean more the like you said, the rules that are maybe a little bit easier to assess.
Yeah.
Not a baseline in what I would think of where we're taking information and then comparing that to some future state.
It's the black and white.
Okay.
Are they in compliance?
That's really helpful.
All right.
So, okay. So I'll make sure to, maybe even from my perspective, try to pull what I would think those might be in rule. So that might be helpful. Okay. Thanks.
Looks like you guys have a half hour more, and we will be posting this on the website, this recording.
Thanks for the opportunity to give feedback. Appreciate it.
Thank you again for your time.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Thank you. Have a great day.